It was kind of cute and a little bit naive when I started working as a clinical psychologist that I thought, oh, I just need to tell people to set better boundaries and rest more, and that will overcome their burnout. My name's Rebecca Anderson, and I've been working with people for many years now, and it's not that simple, funnily enough, to overcome burnout. What's not so cute is when burnout really hits. It is often not something that just needs a bubble bath and a weekend to fix. If it really sets in, I've seen in extreme cases, it literally takes years to overcome. And during that time, people are often unemployed or underemployed. And obviously, that then has ripple on effects for somebody's quality of life, their finances, their sense of self, their confidence, their comparison to other people. So you've got the actual burnout, and then you've got the consequences if you don't deal with it. And the actual burnout can look like cynicism and fatigue, difficulty concentrating, like mood issues. You can feel more irritated. It's this horrible thing that kind of gradually sets in over time. Your demands might stay the same in life, or they might be increasing, and your capacity is just decreasing and decreasing over time. And you've just been holding all of this weight for longer and longer. The first thing when someone comes in with burnout now is I look at the system, not the person. I remember years ago talking to somebody who was very high up in an organization in a very tough industry. And they said to me, oh yeah, we deliberately hire insecure overachievers because we know they'll do the best job. So what can happen is people who are already perfectionistic, very hard on themselves, very conscientious, can enter environments. So often you might have someone who inherently doesn't feel particularly good about themselves underneath and compensates with approval and with achievement. And then you put them in an environment like this where you've got incredibly demanding systems or managers or bosses or clients. It's like their internal critic, which is cracking the whip all the time on them, is now external. So it gets doubly reinforced. They have these very high standards for themselves and these core beliefs that something bad will happen if they don't perform, or they might lose their job, or they won't feel good enough, or they'll feel like a failure. And then they're getting that externally as well. And so like they fit together in their environment a bit like a lock and a key. You've got the person who is insecure, and then you've got the system that's very demanding. And you might think, well, why do these people stay in these environments? And often it's because it mimics either their internal state or the environment and the dynamics they grew up with in their family or their school system. If you are in a system at the moment where you feel like the stakes are too high to leave, so for example, maybe you're 2/3 of the way through a degree that's going to lead to good places, or perhaps you need to stay at a certain job because of the income it's bringing in or your current financial obligations. And that is a really hard place to be. I absolutely think try and get in with some sort of therapist to kind of chat that through with. But until then, it's useful to think about what ownership of this decision can I take? Because I've seen the people who struggle the most with that are people who start to feel trapped and incredibly passive and helpless. And I have even said I feel like almost like a victim in the situation. So if you could say to yourself, I am going to stay in this degree and it's horrible and it's horrific, but I'm willing to do this for my future for the next 6 months. Those people tend to do a little bit better. Like obviously it doesn't fix everything. If you need to be there for a little while, then that can be a little bit helpful. But definitely, yeah, getting with a therapist or your doctor or to speak to friends to start to work out a bit of an exit plan if you feel like the system is not going to be something that you can change. The second thing is that burnout will hit a lot quicker if you're working incredibly hard, but you're also working in an environment where the feedback that you're giving is like falling into a void. You're being micromanaged, you're being bullied, you're being excluded, or perhaps none of those things, but you just find the work quite kind of meaningless, kind of pointless. It doesn't line up with your values, where you want your life to be going. You feel really stuck. Those things can amplify a sense of burnout. Or if you're not being paid very well, if you're pouring all of your energy into something that you're not being financially compensated for, you're not being acknowledged, you're not being praised. We all need some praise. We all need to know that we're doing a good job and that we're valued. We need to be respected. So if those things aren't there, burnout risk is going to increase a lot. I think there's this idea that if you're doing something you love, you won't get burnt out. I don't believe that. I've seen people in jobs they absolutely adore and they still experience burnout because also if your job is taking up all of your time and you have no time for your friends, for eating properly, for sleep, for hobbies, for dreaming, for creativity, for exercise, that's going to hit you at some point, even if it is something that you're very passionate about. And the third thing I would say is individual factors. So is there anything that is making this person more susceptible to burnout? I'll give a personal example. When I first became a clinical psychologist, I was incredibly perfectionistic, kind of an occupational hazard, like to get into psychology masters. I think my degree, there was like 28 places and over 400 or 500 applicants. So it creates this breeding ground for perfectionism. But it meant that when I started working, I was doing way too much. And nobody was telling me to do that, by the way. I either was contracting for other people, so I didn't technically have a boss, or I was working for myself. So it wasn't like a system problem. And what I was doing, I was working literally every single day. So not seeing clients every day, but I was doing like admin and GP letters and research all the time. I was getting stacks. I'm talking like actually that big stacks each time of books from the library on different topics. Cause I just felt like there was so much to learn, which there was. I was, getting external supervision, which I still get, but, peer supervision. And actually my external supervisor, who is a senior clinical psychologist, was telling me that actually I was over functioning for clients, which is a psychology kind of fancy jargon way of saying that I was doing too much and was actually probably unhelpful for clients. So that's a situation where that was a me thing. And I had to learn over many years boundaries. I had a friend at the time who said, "Oh, well, I just don't work on the weekends and I just don't check my emails." And that sounded good. It literally took me years of challenging that and trying to set little boundaries before I was able to, not check emails after hours, not check my work phone. I don't check emails on weekends now. So I'm a lot better with those boundaries now. But it takes a long time to change these things and to set boundaries. And sometimes if we go back to the first part, if you're in a system that also expects you to operate at that insanely high kind of level, if I had been in a workplace that actually said, you need to work 7 days a week, it probably would have been easier for me to find a new workplace because that would have been too much to try and change it. It was already hard enough trying to change that pattern without any external pressure. I think it would have been very difficult to try and change those behaviors if I was in an environment that also told me, no, you should be working that hard and it's helpful. The other thing is that I hear a lot of people say, oh, you should exercise a lot when you're burnt out. And yes, there's lots of good research that shows like burnout can be help with exercise. But I think if you're really, really, really burnt out, going gentle is probably a bit better, like gentle walks or gentle movement, because if your nervous system is up here, I don't think doing really, really intense exercise initially is what I would recommend. Overall, I think if you're struggling with burnout, it's really important to try and seek help and guidance because your situation is going to be unique to you and the factors that are keeping you in that environment or stuck are going to be unique to you. And I want to finish with this quote from Ariana Huffington, who says, "Burnout is not a badge of honor. It's a sign that you've been ignoring your own needs for too long." I hope that was helpful, and I'll see you next time.